Ryan, we've come up with what we've agreed is a rather exciting programme, haven't we?
I think it's a brilliant programme. And it's a programme that you might say begins and ends with a farewell to life in Purcell's wonderful funeral music for Queen Mary and Bruckner's Ninth Symphony.
Which he didn't finish, of course.
Which is unfinished. Well, yes and no. I mean, a lot of that fourth movement was sketched out, but there is something about the three-movement version that is so in our psyche now that we feel that is a complete piece in itself, and certainly the end of the Adagio is such an incredibly beautiful and intense end to a concert that it doesn't need, in a sense, that finale.
So, to anyone who doesn't know this music, because it's quite interesting, Bruckner is extremely popular in Austria and in Germany. In Austria, he was a kind of god of the organ world, and in this country, his interest is a little patchy. So to people who don't know that music, how would you describe the sound world that he's working in?
Bruckner is unique. I mean, he does really stand alone, and that might be part of the reason why his integration into our concert life in England hasn't always been so easy. It requires actually a sort of different way of listening. You're drawn in and held by the compelling sort of inner logic of this. And once it clicks, it's really unlike any other musical experience that I know of. I adore it deeply.
So do I, but I still don't understand it. I often think I'm a bit like the Englishman that Thomas Beecham talked about. I don't understand music, but I like the noise it makes. And Bruckner, to me, sums that up, because the sound world is extraordinarily particular and rather specific, isn't it? People, it's a cliche. People talk about architecture in music, but it really does rather evoke the intricacy of Gothic architecture, doesn't it?
Well, it's very tiered in the way both the ideas work and in the way he treats the orchestra, building it up in tiers. The language itself is incredibly forward-looking, particularly in this symphony, in the ninth. I mean, there is harmony in this work that really hadn't been heard or used before.
It's interesting, Ryan. You bring a particular, it's an overused word, but passion to music, but it's very much from a composer's point of view. You're always aware of the technicalities of what the composer's doing.
I suppose the job of any conductor, though, to be able to analyse what makes a piece work in order to present it to an audience in a way that feels compelling and right. But it's true that this music I love dearly. I mean, I'm always learning from it myself. And I'm fascinated by how it's put together, and the way Bruckner put things together is very different to anyone else.
Well, let's go back now to the opening part of this concert. It's called various things, but Purcell's funeral sentences for Queen Mary, which were written not very long before his own funeral.
Yeah, quite.
And I think the music was played at his own funeral.
Yes.
So that similar premonition quality in this piece.
Well, Bruckner called his Adagio his farewell to life. And with the Purcell, well, it's a kind of conflation of two separate funeral works. What we tend to do now is put the two sets together to make a complete and very satisfying whole.
It's something I've wanted to programme here.
Me too.
For many, many years. And we actually did perform it with the youth orchestra and youth choir at one time.
Yes.
But it's a combination, isn't it, of a cappella, unaccompanied choral music and orchestral interludes, so to speak.
Well, they're brass and drums play the march and the canzona, which are very, very beautiful indeed. you get the two things coming together, the perfection of the English language in these beautiful words from the Book of Common Prayer.
Which was quite new then.
Quite new, 1662. And what you might say is the perfection of English music in Henry Purcell.
There are some very strong musical links between your piece, Locke's Theatre, and the Purcell, aren't there?
The funeral music for Queen Mary was written in 1695, or certainly performed in 1695, and with this music from Matthew Locke, we jump back just over 20 years to 1674, and it was incidental music written for Thomas Shadwell's operatic version of Shakespeare's Tempest. There are very close personal links between Matthew Locke and Purcell. Locke was a generation older, but they would have known each other very well. And Locke was close to Purcell's father. It's underestimated in general, I think, the extent to which Purcell's language comes out of Matthew Locke. And I've always been fascinated by these periods in music history when you get a language about to come to fruition. I'm thinking of C.P.E. Bach sort of leading into Mozart and Haydn, or the composers of the early Renaissance sort of arriving, as it were, in Palestrina. And Locke is a bit like that. Most of the harmonic quirks in Purcell come somehow out of Locke.
So, in your piece, you're looking back. Were you also conscious of those examples where other modern figures have looked back and been inspired and incorporated music of earlier times? I mean, I'm thinking of Britten with his Lacrymae and Vaughan Williams with his Tallis Fantasia, the two very well-known examples.
In the end, I decided for the audience it would be more interesting to hear the original Locke pieces before my version. So you get the three original Locks followed by, well, in sequence. The first Locke, it's called The First Music, and then you hear my take on that. And then the second one is Rustic Music, as a sort of dance.
I love these titles.
Rustic Music, yes.
And
then
it is what it is.
It is what it is. And probably the most incredible of all, the final one is Curtain Tune, he calls it, which is the representation of the tempest, of the storm, which is remarkable in many respects. I think I'm right in saying that it's the first occasion in a written score of an accelerando and crescendo. It's a very dramatic shape, and that segues into my version of his storm.
This is at a time when people didn't write markings like that.
No, not at all.
You make it up?
Yeah, most scores of that period are blank, which of course is, as you know, in our period instrument revival, it's allowed a lot of scope for our own invention almost.
Very exciting.
And very exciting, and the sense of, you know, a real recreation of this music.
As a programme, it brings in lots of elements of what we do, and it relates to important things that we do. For instance, Locke's Theatre we've recorded for the NMC label of British Contemporary Music. Very important part of the work we do. And Bruckner we don't perform as often as we would probably like to, but it really makes the most of an orchestra with this subtlety of tonal palette,
yes,
and the acoustic of this hall, which lends itself brilliantly to it. And then we're able to bring in the choir and a very small group of instruments, which set the rest of the programme in context. And I think it sets it off extremely well.